Hello and welcome to Jessie Bear Book Club. Today we are continuing the Spooktober vibe and reviewing The Witches, Salem, 1692, a history by Stacy Schiff. I got this book in HMV and it was in one of their book deals, so it was 2 books for £6. So this book was only £3 and I had to get it because I kept seeing it being recommended in all the history magazines I read. So I was like, hell yeah, I'm gonna buy this and read this. And of course, used to be a little goth girl back in high school and stuff, so I've always been interested in witchy stuff. And I love history, and what's more history and witchy than the Salem Witch Trials? But I have to be honest, before reading this book, I didn't know very much about the Salem Witch Trials apart from a lot of people died and it happened within the span of 1 year. I'd never watched any movies. I kept seeing this one movie be recommended to me when I was probably about 15. It was on one of those weird Sky channels like True Movie, and they kept recommending it, and I just never got around to watching it because of course we didn't have record or anything, and I always thought, I want to watch that, I'm interested in that, but it never happened. So I read the book. The beginning of this book goes on for ages setting the scene, and it sets it up very well, even if it is a little bit too long and protracted. It tells you a lot about how these people lived, where they came from, because of course most of them were 2nd or 3rd generation European immigrants, so a lot of them came from mainland Europe, so were Germanic or Scandinavian. There were some English, but not that many, and this was a real mesh of ideas about witches that came about in Salem. So it's the first time we really see witches riding on brooms and that sort of thing. There are less animal familiars than there would be in normal English witch trials. You do get animals getting suckled by witches, which is also I think a Germanic thing, if I remember correctly. And then one thing that really interested me was, I think it was Finland, there was a massive witch trial, and it was the first time there were satanic baptisms, and then in Salem there were satanic baptisms. So interesting, how these things correlate and feed off each other and grow. It was also really interesting seeing how intermarried these families within Salem were with each other. I grew up in a small village, so I understand that literally everybody is everybody else's cousin, and if you're an outsider, you can really feel like an outsider because you're not part of this massive extended family. So I really understood that, and it was also interesting because these people were Puritans, how they all kept tabs on each other constantly, and it was like they all just nitpicked and found things that were wrong, like this person fell asleep in meeting, this person doesn't pray at this certain time of night because their candles are still lit. Just weird little things that this village knew about each other's lives, like their intimate lives. The book also explains in detail the Puritan workload and how there were very few festivals within this community. They didn't do Christmas, they didn't do birthdays, I don't think they did Easter. There was nothing for these people to look forward to. So something like a witch trial was a show, was a spectacle, was their only real chance for excitement in their humdrum 24/7 work 12-hour-a-day lives. And as some of the accusers would later say, we accused for sport. As the witch trials get going, there is a small problem with everyone in this village being intermarried, and that is simply that everybody seems to have the same name. Everyone is a Nurse or a Hobbs, or they're called Abigail or Rebecca or Sarah, and it gets very confusing very quickly. I was finding it so hard to keep track of people, and apart from the judges and a few standout people at trial, everyone kind of else goes by the wayside. You're just like, oh, somebody else was executed. Oh, somebody else was executed. Because the trials follow the same pattern. The same sort of things happen. There are a few that stand out, but most of them are very similar. What I did find interesting, though, were the things people were accused of. Sticking pins in people, paralyzing people with fear, creeping into men's bedrooms at night, signing Satan's book, which I did like because that kind of ties into the movie The Witch, which is set around the same time period, so I liked that little nod. But there were other things as well that these people were accused of. Turning into cows or dogs or pigs, or chasing people on brooms, levitating, leaving their bodies and travelling as a soul to haunt people. These things were kind of insane. Riding on poles, which would later be turned into brooms, but riding on poles to satanic meetings. They weren't the standard, oh, put a love spell on this, stole this man's husband, turned whoever into a frog, made the milk go sour. Actually, I think there was somebody who made some milk go sour, but mainly it was very strange things. And you find out while reading this book that for many of these women, this was their second time being accused of witchcraft within the last 10 or 20 years. This was a charge that was thrown into court quite a lot by people, but it was often thrown into court because of land disputes. And then we get into the real nitty-gritty of this village and the things, the grudges that were held for years from father to son, from mother to daughter, that these people hated about each other because an older brother got this tract of land, or the older sister got the house, well, I only got a cow, so we're going to accuse them of witchcraft. And it was the family dynamics that we know very little about because there's very little documentation. You know, people didn't send each other letters, lots of people weren't literate. So we have to go on what was actually said in the court records and what we know about from before the trials. And what we know is a lot of this village hated the other side of the village, and vice versa. Old village grudges refused to die, and more so, family grudges refused to die. And what we need to look at as the Salem Witch Trial progresses are families tearing each other apart. As I said earlier in this review, some of the women in this trial had already been accused of witchcraft years before, and this time they really had no escape. But it distinguishes between the older, don't want to use this word, but hags, who would be accused of witchcraft, who were your normal people, you go, that's a witch, if you see them in the street, and the people who were less likely. Ministers were accused and executed for witchcraft. Well, one minister was, but also richer people seemed to be able to escape these witchcraft charges by simply disappearing. So then, like now, if you have money, you can afford a good lawyer, and if you can afford a good lawyer, you might not get hung or go to jail. You get the reference. The best bit of this book, however, was most definitely finding out what happened to these women after the witch trials and these families. Because some of the women, well, most of the women got hung, but some of the accusers, what happened to them? These girls who'd been pulling needles out of their skin, or fainting, or had their mouths clenched shut for days on end, or thrashed about like somebody was beating them, or had wounds in their sides, or pointed to imaginary yellow birds. What happened to these girls? Most of them went on to lead normal lives. One girl went insane, but a lot of these people thought that they had probably been possessed by a demon later on in life, because just like witchcraft, possession is real if you are a Puritan living in the 1700s. But what I also found very interesting was what happened to the Salem Witch Trial judges. I have been thinking about these guys a lot while reading this book. You condemned 60-odd people to death. How could you live with yourself if you thought on any level that these people were innocent? And later in life, many judges couldn't deal with the fact that they had sentenced so many people who could have been innocent to death. And they felt bad, they wrote books, they apologized publicly in sermons. But one person, Samuel Parris, did not at all say sorry. He was convinced until his last breath that all these people were guilty, and he wrote the book The Wonders of the Invisible World about the Salem Witch Trial at the time, which is what sensationalized this trial throughout the rest of Europe. And he also wrote other books expounding on this idea that witches were real and that he was in the right. Not a very nice man, but what can you do? The world isn't very nice. But it's interesting to learn about him. Stacy Schiff's theory about why the Salem Witch Trials happened was also very interesting. Stacy says that she thinks it was a case of hypertension that occurred within the household of the local minister, Samuel Parris, within his daughter and his niece, because the house was so tense. And then because these girls were getting love and attention and didn't have to go to work because they were afflicted, other teenage girls started to copy their behavior, and it became a case of mass hysteria. And that is when personal grudges got involved and the whole thing got out of hand, because everyone was related, everyone knew each other, and everybody held a grudge about something in the past. Overall, I would give this book 6 out of 10. I enjoyed it to an extent. I wouldn't reread it. Stacy could have perhaps done a little bit of name abbreviation to make it easier for the reader, but it is a good history. Not a book you simply want to pick up to read a chapter in bed of, though. You have to really pay attention. And another good thing about this book, it got me to watch The Crucible, something that I'd never seen, because the book actually references The Crucible quite a few times in the beginning. And I thought, well, you know, I'm reading the book, I'm going to go watch the movie. And I enjoyed the movie. I thought the movie actually drew on a lot of historical accuracies. I know it's based on a play. I'd like to watch the play at some point if I ever get the chance. And this is the end of my review of The Witches, Salem, 1692, A History by Stacy Schiff. If you enjoyed this review, remember to like, comment and subscribe. Maybe let me know who your favourite witch in fiction or history is. And remember, you can follow me on Instagram at Lady Jessica Riddell to keep up with what I'm doing on a day-to-day. I've also started making YouTube shorts, which I really enjoy making. They're fun. Most of them are of my cat. So if you like them and you like cats, check them out. Bye! Happy Spooktober!